Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here. Now, many of you have asked me about making bread, whether that's knowing the proper technique for kneading, when to stop kneading, how to know if your bread is fully proofed. Well, today I'm going to show you how to make this amazing, wonderful, and delicious white bread. It's pretty simple, you don't need that many ingredients. And to start it all off, I have 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast, and I'm going to add that to 1/4 cup of warm water. Now, whenever you're making bread or whenever you're proofing yeast, you really want to use water that is at about 110 degrees. Now, you don't want anything that's much higher in temperature than that because you will kill the yeast, and you don't want anything that's cooler than that because you really want the yeast to grow and to foam. So 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, and the sugar is what feeds the yeast. Give this a little bit of a whisk together, and now let this sit for about 5 minutes until it's nice and creamy. So while that's happening, I have a stand mixer here with a dough hook attachment, and to the mixer add 1 3/4 cups of bread flour. Now, bread flour is very important here because it is higher in gluten than your all-purpose flour, and gluten gives you the structure you need whenever you're making bread. 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt, right in with the flour, and 1 cup of warm water right into your mixer, and now gently mix this on medium speed until it comes together. The yeast mixture, you can see it's starting to foam up, and that means that the yeast is active and it's fermenting and it's creating carbon dioxide, and that will eventually leaven your bread. Now, if this does not happen, that means that your yeast is way too old. Yeast does expire, it does die, so you're gonna have to go out and get some fresh yeast. And now add the second 1 3/4 cups of bread flour, and you add it right here at this stage. And so now this mix is on medium speed for about 5 minutes until a nice cohesive dough forms. So now it's time to add 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 1 tablespoon at a time. And what's gonna happen is the dough itself might come apart into pieces, but it will come back together. And what you're listening for, this slapping, and that is the butter slapping against the sides of the bowl and then incorporating itself back into the dough. So now I'm gonna add the remaining tablespoon of butter here, and this now needs to mix or knead, since we're using the dough hook, until the dough comes back together. So that'll take a few minutes. Now I have to finish the dough, kneading it by hand. So a lightly floured work surface here. And what is kneading? This is a great question, and a question that we get a lot. And kneading is basically the action of folding the dough over itself and using the palm of your hand to push it away. And what this process does is it develops the gluten. Remember, that's the protein in the flour, and now in the dough itself. It develops the gluten, which gives strength and structure to the bread loaf in the end. As you can see, I'm turning the dough. So again, it's folding the dough over itself and then using the palm of your hand to push it down and away from you. Rotate the dough, fold it over, pushing the dough away from you. And you have to do this for a few minutes until the dough is nice and smooth. It's elastic. Now this is smooth, elastic, and beautiful. A little trick here, this is a baker's trick to shape this into a nice round ball. Just gently rotate the dough, pushing down on it with a slight pressure, but using the tackiness of the dough and the board itself to round out the dough into a nice, beautiful, perfect ball like that. So this goes into a buttered bowl. You can turn the dough to coat it lightly in the butter, just so that the surface of the dough doesn't dry out. And now cover with a piece of plastic wrap that's been sprayed with nonstick cooking spray. And this needs to go in a warm place until this has doubled in size. And this is the proofing process. So 45 minutes until it's doubled in bulk. You can see it's doubled in size. It's kind of flattened out in the bowl. And what I'm gonna do on a lightly floured surface, I'm going to, and lightly floured hands, gently pull the dough out onto the board. And you can see how spongy this underside is. And it's the yeast converting all of those starches into sugars, and those sugars are creating carbon dioxide, which gives the bread its structure, its strength, and also a nice airy texture. So I'm gonna pat this out into a 7-inch square. You can see it's very tender, it's not resistant, And that's a way of telling that you've proofed your dough correctly. So now take the top of the dough and fold it down, 2/3 of the way down the bread. So now I'm gonna fold the bottom up until it hits the edge here. And what you're gonna do to seal this fold is with well-floured fingers, give the dough a little bit of a pinch. So I'm kind of like tucking it under and pinching just to seal this all together. And so now I'm gonna gently turn this dough up so that the seam is in the center, fold in the sides. You can kind of give them a little bit of a pinch here. So I have a well-buttered 8.5 by 4.5 inch loaf pan here. Make sure it's evenly buttered so that this bread doesn't stick. So now gently invert this into the pan. You can push it down into the sides of the pan here. And now this goes back into a warm place, and it has to double in size for about 45 to 60 minutes. So this has been a little bit longer than 45 minutes now. The dough has doubled in size. You can see that it's nicely kind of crowning up in the pan. And this goes into the preheated 425 degrees oven for about 15 minutes. And then you're gonna reduce the temperature down to 375 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes more. A good way to check to make sure that the inside of the bread is done is to use an instant read digital thermometer, insert it into the side of the loaf, and it should read 190 degrees, and that's how you know the interior of the bread is cooked. This goes right into the oven, and I can't wait to show you what it looks like when it comes out. So our wonderful, beautiful loaf is right out of the oven, and what you have to do is you have to remove it from the pan so that the bottom doesn't steam. Now be careful, this is hot, but if you can do it quickly. And now, while it's still warm, take some softened butter and a soft bristled brush here and gently brush on the top of the loaf, and that gives a wonderful shine and golden color to your amazing white bread here. Just the top. And now let this cool completely before slicing. Our white bread is ready to slice. It has a really nice crust, but a very soft interior. This is perfect for sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly. Now you have the recipe to make white bread at home. You can see how easy it is. It's just a little practice, that's all it takes. Give it a try.